Hey, good morning, everyone. Welcome to another exciting day. Um, we're going to be going over politics and foreign policy in the 1950s, so that should excite you on this April 7th. But first, I want you to really take a look at Google Classroom because I'm getting a handful of questions, and some of you are not looking at Google Classroom. So if we were to go over to Google Classroom, you guys should see this online calendar and grading guidelines. It was due yesterday. 27 of you did not do that. So please, at least when you wake up today, look at this. Acknowledge the fact that Lone Star College has different grading guidelines than Tomball High School, and there is a little bit of work left in this class for you to get your college credit. Again, Tomball High School, it's not going to be challenging for you. You'll be fine. You do your little completion grade and your competency grade, and you got it. Lone Star, however, does require the discussion board and a final exam. So please click and look at the calendar and then acknowledge that you know this by turning it in. If by the end of the day you still haven't done it, I got to call your house. So please make sure you do it. And as for that discussion board, some of you have been asking me questions and some are kind of freaking out thinking, how am I supposed to do this? It's due next month. Hey, we're in April. This is due 1 month from today. So you guys have time to read your section, which it's probably 40, 50 pages long. And again, that comes from Rise to Globalism. It's not the whole book, it's just a small section. And then you guys will basically click on your little section here. You'll view your question. And then it should give you a spot. Hold on, computer. It'll look different from your side, but it'll give you a spot for you to submit your answer. And where it says submit your answer, just maybe copy and paste it in from like Google Docs or Word, and that'll be formatted correctly for you. You'll have your word count. It'll be edited, polished, and all of that. So I gave you a relatively broad question, but you do need to dig into the chapter. You do need to give me specifics. Look at that rubric, but again, don't freak out. It's due in a month. Now, that doesn't mean wait a month to do it. But if you need to, a week or so to digest it all, that's fine. But you will need to get your way through all of this. And again, look at your assigned class section. With that said, let me know if you have any questions or concerns over it. I need to get into politics and foreign policy in the 1950s. And that can start by looking at the election in 1952. There you have World War II hero Dwight D. Eisenhower and his vice presidential candidate, the Red Hunter, Richard Nixon. Nixon was again made famous through his HUAC, House of Un-American Activity Committee hearings. So he was one of the so-called guys that would find the communists, the Red Hunters. And Eisenhower was not much of a politician, but he had the World War II fame. So whatever political party he chose to go with, the guy's going to win because he's super famous from all of that. When you guys see the link for the I Like Ike campaign commercial, the first televised campaign commercial in history, I think you'll like the simplicity and relative innocence of that thing, maybe even compared to modern day commercials. If you've seen modern day campaign commercials, they're not so nice, they're not so innocent, they're kind of attack based. But watch this one for a point of comparison. And again, there's Richard Nixon, future president. He's going to be the vice president of Dwight D. Eisenhower. Interesting side note with Nixon, he was almost dropped from the ticket. He was allegedly involved in some kind of scandal where he illegally spent some money. So he ends up going on TV saying, "Oh no, the only thing that I got from this, it's not bribery. All I got was my dog Checkers." But you can kind of see pictured right there. So Checkers is the name of his dog. He uses TV to save his political career. And you're starting to see the importance of television in politics. It'll go hand in hand from this point forward. And now I think we've even broadened that out a little more. It's not just TV, it's probably social media as well, revolutionizing politics yet one more time. But Nixon again saves his political career by talking about his dog Checkers. He was about to be dropped from the ticket. And again, just think about the importance of this. If you're curious about Eisenhower and a golf club, he was the one that installed a putting green on the White House lawn. He absolutely loved golf. He would play all the time. He would play at Augusta National, where they play the Masters. There was a tree named after him because he always hit into that tree. But Ike loved golf, simply put. As for the electoral map, you can see Eisenhower dominates. You don't have much of a political shakeup here with old solid South still remaining for the Democrats, but soon all of that is going to flip. It's again, when the Democratic Party goes pro civil rights, these guys will leave. So you'll see that coming over the next 10 years or so. As for foreign policy, this is the bulk of our focus today. Eisenhower implements a new look, meaning he wants to get a bit more aggressive in terms of foreign policy. He's a World War II guy, and now he says containment. Remember what the Truman administration advocated? The Truman administration simply wanted to contain communism. Well, now Eisenhower and his advisors want to do much more because they say containment's too weak. They want to get more bang for the buck. They want to invest in like a nuclear arsenal because that'll be, more bang for the buck. Just nuke someone into compliance is what they're advocating. So he's got a really, really aggressive, you can even say a jingo-like Secretary of State who advocates things like massive retaliation. You attack us, we attack you with everything we have. So just kind of think of these guys not liking containment. Oh, containment, that's too weak. It doesn't work. These guys want to nuke you into submission. They're willing to, advocate massive retaliation. And this is the super jingo Secretary of State behind all of this, John Foster Dulles. Incredibly influential Secretary of State. His brother is also in charge of the CIA. So the Dulles brothers, very influential throughout American history. So just kind of think your way through that. Understand that Eisenhower, Republican, Dulles, very, very aggressive foreign policy. They want to roll it back. They don't just want to contain it. Now, we'll evaluate the effectiveness of rolling back communism throughout a couple examples over today and tomorrow. But just again, think new look, aggressive foreign policy. They're willing to go to the brink of nuclear war to get you to back down. A couple cartoons and quotes about this, but just kind of think they're willing to push you. They're willing to drop those bombs and almost play a game of nuclear chicken, if you think of it that way. So, a few good terms for you to note: more bang for the buck, massive retaliation, rollback communism, and brinkmanship. Here's the first example of brinkmanship. China wanted Taiwan back. Maybe you guys remember the fun details from world history about China and Taiwan, or at least the nationalist government being exiled to Taiwan. Ms. Fleece, Ms. Mercer, maybe they covered it. But just kind of think when the Chinese Communist Revolution happened, the non-communists were stuck in Taiwan, and China now wants to take it back. So they start to like bomb these little outer islands of Taiwan. And again, we don't want communism to spread. We want to roll it back. So Eisenhower actually sends in like our nuclear fleet, our Navy, equipped with nuclear subs ready to shoot at China to get them to back down. And here you can see this cartoon. Don't even think about it, China. This worked. They did back down. Taiwan would still be nationalist today. So just understand that they're getting very, very aggressive in terms of their foreign policy, willing to nuke China so that they don't expand communism into Taiwan. There's John Foster Dulles. The ability to get to the verge without getting into the war is the necessary art. If you're scared to go to the brink, you're lost. We follow this policy of brinkmanship for quite some time. The most famous example is probably depicted right here. That's John F. Kennedy and Nikita Khrushchev. Here they are arm wrestling with their fingers on the button, ready to drop the bombs. That's, of course, over Cuba. We're getting close to explaining the whole Cuban Revolution. I'll be doing that tomorrow, and we'll discuss how that carries over to the Kennedy administration in the early 1960s. But brinkmanship, that's our policy for quite some time. We got a few global developments. Again, this is tapping into a little bit of world history, European history knowledge. I'll just give you a brief overview of what's going on here. Remember, after World War II, the Soviets take over like all of Eastern Europe. Eastern Europe does not want to be taken over, so Hungary actually has a democratic revolution. So they have a democratic revolution. They've got like 6 days of freedom, and then the Soviets storm in with tanks and they absolutely crush it. Now, wait a minute, you're thinking, don't we want to roll back communism? Don't we want to jump in and support the Hungarian revolutionaries, the new democratic government that was established in Hungary? Yeah, we didn't. So, in terms of rolling back communism, we got to pick and choose where we're going to do it. If we jump into Eastern Europe and try to roll it back, we're looking at World War III. So, this one, we just kind of let the Soviets take Hungary back. And we sat on the sidelines there. So the effectiveness of rolling back communism, again, it works in Taiwan, kind of. Taiwan was never communist to begin with. We just don't want to let it spread. So just think this is a lot of talk, to put it simply. We don't roll it back here. Ooh, as for the example in Iran, you guys might be familiar with this because it's still some ongoing hatred with that country and us. We've been close to war with Iran a number of times. There's still conflict to this very day. Why doesn't Iran like us, though? I think that's the root of the question. Anyone know why Iran doesn't like us? A lot of it can come to the CIA's involvement in the early 1950s. So the way to explain why Iran does not like us today, it's rooted in a 1953 coup. The Eisenhower Doctrine, that puts the United States very, very involved in the Middle East because we want to secure an oil supply. By the 1950s, we're running low on oil. We know the Middle East has a ton of oil, and we want to control that oil. So what happens in Iran, they elect a guy that is going to nationalize all of the oil, meaning he's going to kick out the foreign governments that controlled it, and he's going to take that oil for the country of Iran. Well, the United States does not allow that to happen. So we link up with the British intelligence agencies, and we overthrow that democratically elected guy in Iran, and we install a dictator. So this is our CIA covertly. We're doing this kind of undercover. We find a few exiles, we get them involved, and our CIA will overthrow a democratically elected guy, installing a dictator who is just hated by the people of Iran. If you've seen this movie, Argo, I played it in my movie club this year. You got a pretty good understanding about this whole situation. If you haven't seen the movie, I'm going to give you a link for the first 3 minutes that explains this history yet again. So it's good, it's interesting. It totally connects the fact why Iran does not like us today. In fact, they call us the Great Satan. Just kind of think the United States overthrew a democratically elected guy to secure their oil. And to make it worse, we installed a dictator who was cruel to the people of Iran. Eventually, in 1979, this guy was overthrown, and they've gone kind of a radical route since, blaming the United States for a lot of their problems. Is Iran the only country that we've done this in? Oh no, we've got several more examples that we need to examine. So again, watch this, 3 minutes, beginning of Argo. You might like the whole movie. After you see it, it's really good. I highly recommend it. But now let's look at Guatemala. I don't think world history covers too much on this. I actually had to take a class in college. It was just on Central American history in the 20th century. So it was one of those like 2-hour classes where you get in some tedious detail on Central American history. But the root of it, we don't want Central America to go communist. We're fearful of them going communist. And we always kind of think of like Central America or Latin America as our, backyard. And think back to early 20th century jingoism, the whole Roosevelt corollary to the Monroe Doctrine, the big stick policy. We are constantly involved in Latin America. We've got troops there throughout the entire 20th century, really, with the only exception being that good neighbor policy that FDR briefly implemented. Well, looking at Guatemala, I'm hoping you guys remember something about dollar diplomacy. That was during the Taft administration, where he advocated that American companies invest in Latin America. Well, United Fruit Company did indeed invest. In fact, this company ends up owning most of Guatemala. They own most of the land, and this company alone made twice the amount of money that all of Guatemala did. So they own all the good land. Meanwhile, the people of Guatemala are like very, very poor. They're struggling. They're starving. So sure enough, Guatemala has an elected guy who wants to start taxing the United Fruit Company and taking some of their unused land. Uh-oh, taking some of their land, taxing this company, we dub it communist. So with the help of the Dulles brothers, this is again the Secretary of State, John Foster Dulles, and his brother is in charge of the CIA. They decide to overthrow this freely elected guy, and they're going to install a bad dictator who is going to ban all opposing political parties and put in a totalitarian regime for the next like 40 years. Again, we've done this a number of times. The United States stages a coup in Guatemala so they can continue to exploit the bananas. United Fruit Company, they continue to dominate there for much of the 20th century. So think your way through this. Without a doubt, it is controversial. There's a whole lot of history there. In fact, this is a 300-page book simply about the American coup in Guatemala. So hopefully you understand this, at least on the surface level. I guess the main question is, why are we getting involved in countries like Iran and Guatemala? What are they trying to do? Well, in Iran, they're trying to nationalize the oil, take the oil. In Guatemala, they're trying to tax this company. We don't want that stuff to happen. We lump it in with communism or socialism, and we essentially overthrow to allow, say, capitalism to reign. But in allowing capitalism to reign, bad dictators take over who allow these American companies to continue to exploit them for quite some time. Bad blood, without a doubt, emerges in Iran against us and in Latin America against us. I know it's complicated stuff, so I'm stopping it here because I got a handful of other countries that I need to look at tomorrow in Southeast Asia and 90 miles south of Florida in Cuba. So I'll cover those tomorrow. And again, we've got a short week with Good Friday this Friday, so there's no school. I think my wife is trying to say hi to you. She's also working. I don't know where Matthew is right now, so he didn't give his fun fact of the day. Sorry about that. My dog, of course, is sleeping. Again, let me know if you have any questions. Have a good afternoon.